This episode of the Decent Dads podcast is brought to you by our good friends over at 5 Pound Apparel. 5 Pound Apparel is a premier apparel and goods company selling products that benefit people all over the world. Their products are handmade with love and can't be found anywhere else. And the cool thing about 5 Pound Apparel is everything they sell has been handpicked or designed by their team to benefit someone specifically somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. And with Father's Day right around the corner, we've partnered with 5 Pound to give our listeners a special discount code worth 15% off their next purchase. Just use code DecentDads15 at time of purchase. That's Decent Dads, all one word, spelled DecentDads15. Personally, I'm a big fan of 5 Pound in general. I was already wearing one of their hats today when they asked us to do this, and most of my t-shirts are also 5 Pound. So we're very excited to be partnering with them.
Big fans.
Honestly, just thanks so much, 5 Pound, for agreeing to support the Decent Dads podcast.
Hey, all, my name is Bryant Young.
And Derek Chaney.
Here with the Decent Dads podcast. Brand new episode this week.
That's right. Another good one. Another first for us.
Yeah.
We had Matt Simpson on, our first elected official.
City councilman, mayor pro tem, big man on campus around here.
And, man, he shared some great dad advice that he utilizes, that his dad shared with him, that I think both of us really loved.
Frankly, I felt a little bit dad-shamed by just how good at being a dad he seems to be.
Yeah, right? He talked about how well he planned out a road trip.
Yeah, you guys are going to love this one. Matthew is extremely insightful and sharp, and God, he just loves his kids, and it shows in the way he talks about raising them. So I think you guys are going to really enjoy this one.
Yep, you will, for sure.
So I say we get this thing going, huh?
Let's do it.
All right, Decent Dads podcast. Here we go. Good evening, folks, and welcome back to the Decent Dads podcast. We're here to tell dad jokes, drink coffee, and build a community of dads navigating fatherhood together. I'm Bryant Young, fearless leader, co-host, girl dad, and your friendly local insurance agent based out of Springfield, Missouri. And now, before we get started on today's episode, I just messed it up. There we go. Please help me welcome. He's a 6'3" sophomore shooting guard from small town Missouri. He wishes he was a first-team All-American, but instead, he's the coolest co-host with the most, a fantastic father of two, and the home loan expert. Folks, put your hands together and welcome the incomparable Mr. Derek Chaney. I didn't have to do anything weird because I'm not very good at reading introductions.
That's okay. You'll get there. You'll get there.
One of these days, it's almost like this is our 30-something episode.
I was going to say, if only you had rehearsed that a couple more times, you would have had it. You would have had it. But no, it is a great day for a great day, guys.
It's a good day.
For me personally, got the cast off today. It's my first day walking in 2 months. Never thought I'd be so excited to walk again. But yeah, and we got our hoppy coffee in hand, a little locally not
brewed by your mama.
I was gonna say, yeah. I was trying to think of another word besides brewed, but
you can brew both.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But no, we got another good guest on here today. Got Matt Simpson. So Matt, I know I've met you a couple times just around the community. Bryant knows you a little bit better.
Yeah.
So if you will, tell us who you are, what you do, give us your dad resume, tell us how many kids you got, what are their ages, and which one's your favorite.
And why you made us all look bad by dressing so nice.
True. Good point.
I'll have to think about that.
Dress to impress.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, glad to be here. So Matthew Simpson, as you said, I'm chief research. I have two jobs. One pays, the other doesn't pay. The paying job is chief research officer at Ozarks Technical Community College. So I get to do a lot of work with numbers there and figuring out what's the best way we can do things for students in our community, which is a lot for a research guy, getting to do something that's actually used for decisions, because that's not true of a lot of research.
Verified error,
yes,
for sure.
That's a pretty fun job. And then my unpaying job is I'm on city council for Springfield. So I've represented Zone 4 since 2018, was appointed in 2018, reelected in 2019, and then again in 2021, and then also serve as mayor pro tem for the council. So
nice.
Get to do a lot of community work with that I really enjoy. Dad credentials, I married my wife, Teresa, met her at Missouri State. She is a a teacher at Springfield Ballet, and we have 2 kids. Oldest is 7, Daniel, and then our youngest is 3, Arthur. So
Awesome.
both sons.
2 boys. 2
Yeah.
crazy boys. I can relate.
So much fun, man. I'm envious of that. I think that'd be a blast. Well, and
some days.
thanks for being here, pal. I mean, I joked about it earlier, but our first elected official on the show here, so now we feel very official.
Yeah.
I joked with my wife. I was like, maybe I should put on a blazer to feel more official for this thing. And
we
then
should have.
here comes Matthew with his jacket. It's like, oh well, I should have done it then. Dang it, didn't get it done.
We should have.
So the honest answer on the attire is just that I'm kind of lazy and I don't like to have to plan out more than one outfit per day. So the outfit I start the day with is usually the outfit I end the day with.
very, very dad of you.
Yeah, I actually don't hate that thought process at all. I really like that. Speaking of dad stuff, we do something every week. We call it Tantrum of the Day. Inevitably, your kids are going to have tantrums sometimes on a weekly basis, and I figured your family is no different. Tell us about something you might have been dealing with lately.
Same as with everyone. I think our most recent tantrum was over the garage door, and he would get to open it, which resulted in the garage door beginning to open and then closing and beginning to open and closing for I think I lost count at about 12. Oh, gosh. Before eventually someone got distracted and it was able to
Ball, squirrel.
Yeah.
And so was it just one of them started to push the button and somebody else wanted to push it back? And
one of them was saying that he wanted to push the button, which of course spurred the other to push it, and then the tantrum began and the alternating pushing of the button.
No, I want to do it. No,
Yeah.
I want to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
that is one thing I'm excited I don't have to deal with my daughter, is that there's only one of them and she can't argue with herself yet. It's going to happen inevitably.
Yeah,
But
you'd be surprised.
what about you, DC? What do you got?
Man, always wanting what the other one has. So mine was, or actually has to do with swim lessons. So Liam's in swim lessons right now.
So does mine.
Oh, funny. And he loves water, loves swimming. However, these last couple weeks, we didn't really plan this out real good. We have soccer for like 45 minutes to an hour, and then we got 15 minutes to make it to swim lessons, and then you have swim lessons right after that. So being 3 years old, right?
Busy.
I mean, that kind of wears the little dude out, right?
Sure.
So by the end of swim lessons, he's not real happy, and swim lessons get over at like 7, which is typically when we get him ready for bed most nights. So we're at the end of swim lessons the other night, and your daughter goes to the same place Liam does. There's a big slide that they let him go down once swim lessons are over, and so Liam climbs up the slide, or up the ladder there to the slide, and normally he loves going down it, and he made it to the top, and I think he looked back and realized he was up pretty high, because I think it's nine feet I think off the ground.
Yeah, it's a long ways up in the air.
And he kind of got upset and starts, losing a little bit, not too bad. But so Allie goes up there and she grabs him and takes him down. And she's like, okay. She's like, well, here, I'll just put you about halfway up the slide put you over the edge and let you slide down that way. You're not near as high up. And again, he's tired at this point. He's wore out. And the tantrum kicks in hardcore. At that point, he's losing it. He's just like arms wrapped around Allie. And Allie's like, no, you need to go down the slide. You need to go down the slide. He's like trying to push him on the slide, but he's not letting go. And I'm just sitting over here watching all this because I can't do anything.
Yeah.
And just taking it all in. And then finally she gets his little arms off of her, and she's still trying to push him down the slide, and he gets 2 handfuls of hair. And so you just see arms stretched out, holding onto hair while he's halfway down the slide. Oh, no. Allie's head is just down, trying to get his hands off. And eventually he lets go, goes down, goes into the water, and he's of course pissed at that point. But
oh man, poor buddy. Actually, poor mom.
It was
really.
it was one of those moments you felt bad for your wife, but at the same time too, you're like, man, I wish I would have got this on video because it would make such a great memory years down the road.
That you should only watch, because if she were to see that, she'd get mad at you all over again for recording.
Wouldn't share that. So would you say that whole situation was going literally and figuratively downhill from?
Yes,
from the beginning?
Hardcore. Dad joke number one.
Joke number 1. Count it. Write it down.
This is
Nice
going to be
work,
good.
Matthew.
This is going to be good.
Well, I appreciate being in a place where dad jokes are encouraged.
Come on now. This is. I mean, we could do an hour full of it.
Right.
He and I have done a joke off back and forth. One episode where we just
that was
sat
a
there,
while.
rapid fire told them to each other. So it's been fun.
Well, what's your swim lesson story?
So we went back to swim lessons. Elsie has done one 8-week swim lesson deal when she was maybe just under a year.
She was little.
It was early.
Right,
It was way early. Might have been too early, honestly. Like it was one of those deals where she had obviously didn't take because we went back to swim lessons this week, and by the end of it last time, she was having a blast, just splashing around, didn't mind it. The only thing she didn't like was laying on her back, and as a little kid and the water, that makes sense.
Oh, the floating thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
This time, she was latched onto me like a barnacle and would not let go. And I was trying to, okay, we're going to kick our feet. Put your feet out. Kick your feet. No. And she was like, it wasn't tantrumy, yelling, screaming, slashing the water or anything. It was just, for whatever reason, she was not having it.
I ain't going to do it, Dad.
I'm not doing it. And so it finally got to the point where it was like, okay, we got to do, because the way they do some lessons is you're kind of passing your kid back and forth to the instructor, but when they do it, they might dunk your kid's face under the water a little bit. Well, else, this will come as a huge surprise to both of you. We are pretty loud-mouthed, and our mouths don't close very often. Well, Elsie, when she's trying to swim, instead of closing her mouth, she goes even wider. Big, giant, happy grin.
Takes it all in.
and just mouthfuls of water.
Yep.
And so you can see her. She comes up sputtering and like, okay, kiddo, close your mouth. Can you put a big bubble in your mouth? As soon as she hits the water. And so by the end, I mean, she's just sputtering, and if she could curse, she'd be cursing. This is just so pissed. But I think she'll be better in a couple of weeks when she gets more accustomed to being back in the pool.
Sure.
But yeah, the poor kid, she just could not get her head wrapped around, okay, you got to close your mouth, because every time she was open, she'd come up just freaking out.
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, we're going to have to get over that, I guess, kiddo.
Well, they also make them blow bubbles in that class, right? So,
and I work on that every night in the tub with her. Couldn't get it done in the pool.
Oh, for the longest time, Liam, instead of blowing bubbles, he would suck in the water and drink it. And it's like, dude, no, you're supposed to do the opposite of
all
that.
the pools to do that in, too,
Right?
the one where they train little kids,
Right?
not a good
Hey,
cocktail.
hey,
Not a good cocktail.
Just building that immune system. Yep.
Gross.
Yep. Well, Matt, we do one other thing on here.
Dad hack alert!
We do the dad hack or dad advice.
Yeah.
So we won't make our guests go first. Bryant, I'll let you.
Nice.
You go first on your best dad hack this week.
Yeah,
or
well,
dad
we
advice.
talked about it, that it's, we're getting ready for pool time. It's getting ready to be summer. It's getting hot. By the time this comes out, it'll be hot.
It's true. Yep.
And my daughter, as she gets older, is getting harder and harder to get her to stay in one place. I mean, it's inevitable. When they're little tiny babies, they stay in one place, and you can just set them there, and they don't move. And now she's almost 2, and she runs around like a chicken with her head cut off. And so I have discovered that as we spend more time outside, it's harder and harder to get sunscreen on her. Because my wife is white as the driven snow, and her... she passed that on to my daughter. I mean, it is just, she's a little pasty baby running around. And so we're scared to death of her getting sunburnt. And so we discovered you can put sunscreen on Elsie a lot easier if she's strapped into something. So we don't get her out of the car before we put sunscreen on her. We leave her in the car and put sunscreen on her while she's strapped into the car and can't get away from us.
Good idea.
Or we'll strap her into her...
High chair.
Thank you very much. Upstairs before we go out in the backyard. It's like, hey, let's have a snack. Set her down on the high chair, strap. Lather her down with sunscreen, and then send her out in the backyard. So she can't get away from me when she's strapped in. So that's my dad hack, is strap your kids in if you need to, because it works a lot easier and you have to track them down.
Okay, that's a good one. A good one. Well, Matt, we'll let you go next. What do you got?
Well, my dad hack, and I'll share this one because I practiced it today, so it's been a friend of mine.
Perfect.
Is I try to do every week a what we call a Dad Daniel dinner. Daniel's my oldest son, where my wife almost always picks him up from school, and he's always very talkative. I think when he's just got out of school, but maybe less so by the time I get home from work, because he's already talked it out.
Told all the stories.
And also he, as with many kids that age, would tend to be more selective eaters and consistent in their choices. So what we did is we talked about how neat it would be if you would want to do every week. We have a dinner out with just the two of us.
Cool.
And he loved that idea, and so we set that as a weekly thing. We'll pick a different restaurant each time. I was a local restaurant, and go out there. And tonight we did the Rorizo Brazilian steakhouse.
Yeah, nice, cool.
So that was very very different than we usually go with him, and it's a good chance for him to not only kind of try new foods but be enthusiastic about it. So we got there tonight and they had a kids menu, and he originally wanted to do the mac and cheese, and then he saw some of the other food that people had and decided he wanted to do the full thing like like I was doing, and then he always have great conversations there and get to talk about his school day sometimes more than he wants to on kind of normal evenings.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I really like that.
I do too. I mean, it gives you guys some one-on-one time too, some bonding time, right? And,
yes.
And like you said, makes them try new food, which is always difficult.
That's got to be a
with
huge
kids
thing.
our ages.
So, pick a kid. What's his go-to?
Mac and cheese right now. It changes. But
Okay.
Mac and cheese right now.
Yeah, I wondered if there's because it seems like every kid's got to go to.
I still love mac and cheese.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that. Yeah.
This is a body built by mac and
Built
cheese,
by
fellas.
mac and cheese. That's good.
What about you, DC? What do you got?
I got some dad advice this week. Not mine originally, but
That's okay. You don't have to tell the internet.
yeah. Well, I stole it from the internet. I follow, I don't know, probably like 4 or 5 different dad pages on Facebook. And, I was scrolling through
I use
there.
Instagram because I'm hipper than he is.
Oh yeah, well yeah, I'm old school. But yeah, so I was scrolling through there and a video popped up, and is this dad, and he was talking about how first child is daughter, then he has 2 younger boys. And he's talking about how they're just crazy all the time, and sometimes he gets super frustrated with them whenever they're being crazy or whenever they're being upset. And Matt, you can probably relate to this too, just knowing how wild boys are. And he said he got some good dad advice from some older guy that he was basically complaining to this guy about his kids and when they were losing it and whatnot. The older guy told him, he's like, next time they're losing it or being crazy and you're really frustrated as a dad, he's like, just close your eyes for a second, and he's like, think that you are 80 years old when your eyes are closed here, and he's like, you have the opportunity to go back to one point in time in your life, and that time is right now. While all this is happening, that's the only time you get. He's like, if you think of it like that, he's like, you will instantly not regret it, and you'll want to be there. You'll want to be present with your kids, and
Cool.
the situation won't seem that big at that point, right? And you'll gain a lot more patience that way, and not let your emotions get the best of you. So I was like,
Yeah. I mean,
That's pretty
80-year-old you would trade spots with getting to be with his little kids again,
Right.
in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So I love that.
yeah,
That's
that
awesome.
kind of hit home because I was like, yeah, I mean, it's easy to get frustrated, with your kids, and I'm like,
With you, the patience of Methuselah that you have, right.
Yeah, right. Oh man, kids though,
It's good though. It's half the fun.
it is.
So, Matthew, I've alluded to it a couple of times, but you're our first elected official on the show. So we hoped to kind of pick your brain about that a little bit. Like, how do you explain what you do with council to your kids? What is that? Have you talked to them about that? Like, what's that conversation like?
We have, and that's kind of changed over time. I've always tried to, involve them as much as possible. There are some things that can be involved in more than others, and you also have to balance, letting them be exposed as much as possible without maybe letting them be exposed to some of the negative stuff.
Oh yeah,
So, sure.
Which is probably tough.
That can be a tricky balance, but I also think he's gotten to both of my kids, especially Daniel, but both of them have gotten to have, I think, a lot of really good experiences out of it, and experiences that I hope are ones that they'll remember and will help in terms of whether it's doing what I do or whatever they pick, thinking about what are ways that you can get involved and give back to your community as you get older, because they've grown up kind of seeing that, and hopefully that's an example that they will remember. So I think about some of the neat things Daniel's got to do. He's got to help with ribbon cutting at parks and new playgrounds,
Cool.
which he really gets a kick out. He gets to. It's in.
Oh, how much fun is
Right?
that, man? Like, yeah,
To be
this
the
is my
first
part.
kid
I'm
on the-
opening this
on the
thing. Let's go.
playground?
Yeah, that's and the interesting thing is how how quickly something like that kind of becomes the norm. If that's what you grow up experiencing.
That's a good point.
It's the same thing with. I remember, my dad was a long time administrator at Missouri State, and he was over enrollment management. And about once a year for fall enrollment, he'd be interviewed on KY3, and it would be a huge deal. We'd know about it. He'd call let my mom know. We'd have it on KY3 ahead of the news starting just to make sure. We'd watch it.
Oh yeah,
it would be big deal, and we'd be all excited talking with him about it. Daniel is. He expects to see like me in the paper and the news or on the radio. Like for him, this is not
that's funny. Yeah.
This is not a big thing. This is what
normal
everybody's
Tuesday.
everybody's parents do. So I always try to he'll ask questions about what we're dealing with, and I always try to to talk about it with him and share as much information as I possibly can. I've got to come and speak with his class before too, and kind of talk about it and kind of relating it to decisions that they make and how they might work as a group when they have different opinions on kind of what to do and how to come to a decision and relating that. The interesting thing is, I talked about all the different things that the city does, and I thought that parks is what they'd be most interested in. And some of them were a lot of suggestions on what adding trampolines to parks and bigger slides.
No issues there.
Although it doesn't sound like bigger slides would be great for everyone.
Yeah. Liam's out. No.
But the biggest thing that the kids in class wanted to talk about is how the police could help them if somebody stole their money, and there were a ton of variations on that. I didn't realize elementary school students
was such a big deal.
Had such a big issue with people stealing their money, but
Sure.
even when we'd kind of redirect the question kind of back to parks, one kid raised his hand and said, "Okay, so if I'm at the park and someone steals my money there, will the police come and help me?" Hopefully they left that meeting reassured that the police would help them if someone stole the money at their parks at the park. But and Daniel gets to by going to those events and by trying to keep him as involved as possible, he's got to know the other people on council. He's got to know the mayor really, really well. And that's neat for him because, if you read kids, we all read lots of kids' books.
Yeah.
Mayors are big deals. Mayors are usually the biggest political figure in kids' books if there's one in there.
For sure.
And so him getting to know and kind of he talks about talking with the mayor and that makes him really happy. And Arthur is starting to get into to some of that as well. So it's really neat to kind of see them take an interest in that.
Fun. Dr. Lathan set up our local superintendent for our school district here in Springfield set up a program where it was principal for a day. And myself and a few other people with the Springfield Chamber of Commerce got the opportunity to go do that. And when we all came back together after that day, having toured our schools, the mayor was with us, and he was the talk of the town at all of the schools, and he had only been to one of them. And again, I hadn't really thought about it, but you're absolutely right. Like that is the biggest political figure in most books that our kids read.
Yeah. Or you watch Paw Patrol. It's not the president on there. It's the mayor.
Yeah.
No, competing mayors. Yeah.
Well, and there were several kids that were like, he said that there were several kids that didn't want to go on their field trip or something along those lines because the mayor was in the building and we got to meet the mayor instead of going on our field trip. And like, what was better as a kid than a field trip?
Yeah.
So
Right.
obviously that mayor carries some clout, but you've got Mayor Pro Tem after your name, so you get to throw that out there a little bit too. Were they pretty excited to see that title?
They were excited to see me doing the swearing in. I don't know that they necessarily fully understand kind of the title yet.
No,
but,
of course not.
But seeing the swearing in and is something that they always enjoy. And my wife a lot of times will put the meetings on at home while they're eating dinner and getting ready for bed. And she tells me about anytime I speak or ask a question on something, they stop and they look and they say something. And it is really neat. I hope I don't know that this is necessarily this is the path that my specific path is the path they would take, and I hope they pick whatever path they want. But my main goal, I think, all of this is whatever path they pick have that element of community kind of service in it.
Sure.
What a good foundation. I mean, that you're building for them, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're already getting them involved in, like you said, the community service and meeting the other council members and whatnot. But yeah, I'm still blown away that the epidemic of people stealing children's money is so prevalent here in Springfield. But
It's embarrassing.
Yeah, maybe we can figure it out.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, what about because, I mean, yours is a leadership role, certainly. Do you have any plans or have you had any conversations about leadership with your kids? Because that was something that was a big part of my childhood, having done a lot of scouting and student government and a lot of that stuff. That was something that my parents were very passionate about getting me involved with. It might be a little early for your kids, but I wondered if you'd kind of had any of those talks. Maybe it's you and your wife or you and your kids.
Yeah, I think that the big thing I always kind of emphasize with them is a lot of times, even when we're out kind of doing something, we see something that we can help with, and a lot of and let me tie this back to kind of one of the biggest pieces of advice that I ever got from my dad that has had a huge impact on my life, and kind of is the basis for how I try to set these examples. Is whenever we would go camping as kids, and we did that a lot. Cool. At the end of the camping trip, my dad would always give my brother and I each a bag and tell us we need to pick up X number of pieces of trash, usually 70 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was far more than we produced. And we'd always complain, as you'd expect.
But I didn't make all this.
I didn't make this trash. I didn't
Such
smoke
a
all these
response.
cigarettes that are, lying on the ground. Why are we having to pick them up? And he'd tell us, somebody else is going to be in this campground after us, and we want to leave it in better shape for them.
Good for you.
And
Great advice.
and I still didn't like picking up the cigarettes, but I understood why we were doing it, and I did it.
Sure.
And so that's what, when we're out, we talk about, there are things that we can do. We didn't create the problems maybe that we're seeing, but if we can solve them, the difference that makes for the next person that comes along, because they can understand. You go to a playground that's dirty or with things that are broken, that's not fun for them, and they can think about how it's not going to be fun for the next kid that comes. And so if we can change that experience for them, that's something that is worthwhile and,
Cool.
and makes a difference.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, and I think it's funny too once you become a parent, and you realize, you look back on those pieces of advice or those things that your parents made you do, and like you're exactly saying,
Hated it at the time.
At the time,
Hated
you're
it.
like, this is so dumb. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
But then you're like, once you become an adult, and especially once you become a parent, it all just kind of clicks. You're like, okay, I see what they're doing now, and you're like, yeah, my kids aren't going to like this either, but they'll thank me later, right? So
Yeah. Support for this episode is brought to you by 5 Pound Apparel. Just in time for Father's Day, we've partnered with 5 Pound Apparel to give the listeners of the Decent Dads podcast 15% off their next purchase when they use code DecentDads15. That's DECENTDADS15. Thank you, 5 Pound Apparel, for supporting local and decent dads everywhere.
so yeah, man, that's awesome advice your dad gave you there. I mean, what's some other good stuff that you learned from your dad? I'm sure with you being in education, he was in education. There might be some similar things there that he passed on to you.
So him being in education, obviously big impact with me pursuing a career in education as well. And my mom was a public school teacher too, but he was always very, very passionate about his job, very passionate about the university, and would anytime we'd go out to dinner, he would always talk with the waiter or the waitress, and if they were anywhere in a position where they were remotely considering going to college, he would make sure that they had his card, and that
Cool.
and he would follow up with them.
Wow.
And he would tell us about, and we would see sometimes students who he had helped get a start at the university, and would come up and talk about how much it meant to them, and that always stuck with me. And that idea of aligning that passion that you have with what you do as a job was something that was a lesson I think I took from him as well.
Cool.
I think another
So
big
cool.
one, and this is one that I think it wasn't necessarily from when I was a kid, but as a kid, I think as with most kids, you kind of see your parents as infallible, at least up to a certain age, and you think that they have all the answers.
Yeah, they got it all figured
they read
out.
the manual, they know what they're doing. And so I thought that, but my dad, as an adult, now once I was an adult, he would talk to me about things that he wished he had done differently, or talk about things that he made, mistakes that he made, and kind of what he learned from them, and different ways he wished he would have kind of parented in retrospect, and that was something that has been really meaningful for me too, as a parent, is that I don't feel like I have to be perfect, and that's kind of hard, because I'm someone who in my work and in my volunteer stuff, I always am on the mindset that you do enough preparation, you do enough research, you work hard enough, you can minimize mistakes. You can never eliminate them, but you can minimize mistakes. But with parenting, I mean, the research is usually conflicting at best. Right. It doesn't usually hold up to real world examples very long before things kind of start to break down. And you can do all the prep work and all the research possible, and you're going to run into situations where you don't know what the answer is. And I think it's important to always set the best examples, to always model the ethics, model responsibility to others, model kindness, model all those things. But you don't have to try to always be modeling perfection. When you make mistakes, own up to the mistakes. Do something wrong, apologize for them, and I think that's just as valuable, as because everybody makes mistakes. They will make mistakes, and seeing you not kind of hide them or pretend that they don't exist, but acknowledge them and kind of deal with them, and hopefully learn from them, and kind of modeling that, I think is useful as well.
Man,
he just hit the nail on the head. We've talked about it before.
Well said.
I like the way you describe doing, not saying, though, because we've talked about that before on the show, that it's your kids pick up way more what you do than what you say. Yeah. And so if you're modeling those good decisions, or if you're modeling, those ethical thought processes, I love that, man. Well said.
Thanks. Matt, your personality kind of sounds like mine, and very, very type A, very probably perfectionist before you became a parent, right?
Yes.
So how hard was that at first? Because I know I really struggled with that too. It's this has to be there, this has to be there. They have to do this just this way, and then you realize none of that really matters.
It is, and it's still really difficult. I have to be intentional about stopping and thinking to myself, I'll plan. We're always out doing a ton of stuff, I think, any given weekend, and I'll plan itineraries, and I'll think of all these things that, boy, the kids are going to love these things, right? And then we kind of get started, and they find something else that I feel like is very kind of minor and basic, but that's what they want to do.
Yep.
Sure.
And I have to kind of just remind myself, like, this is about them. It's not about me having planned the right itinerary and making sure we stick to it. It's about let's do what they want to do and what they're going to get the most enjoyment out of.
Yeah.
Oh, so true.
Teeing up those conversations.
Right.
Is there, Derek, I'll ask you, is there anything that you've really, specific lessons or anything that you've taken away from your parents? Specific, maybe even your dad specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking about that today, looking over Matt's questionnaire, and man, there was a lot. It's just, I think, trying to figure out things yourself, not always just relying on somebody else to I've talked about here before, hiring somebody to go do something. My dad, again, he was a farmer. He'd always try to figure out how to fix things or how to make things work, and so being able to do that, obviously
self-sufficiency.
Yeah, self-sufficiency. Obviously, the whole hardworking aspect, but really probably the biggest thing I took away from him, and I think we probably mentioned it on here before, is don't put off what you can do today for tomorrow, right? I mean, knocking it out today, and then you don't have to worry about it tomorrow, and then you can do something else tomorrow, and try to get ahead.
Yeah.
My dad, he's given me a ton of good advice over the years, and but yeah, it's just a few of the nuggets.
Well, you referenced figuring out that your dad. At some point, you figure out that your dad's infallible. Well, I'm 34 years old, and I'm still on the payroll. I work in a family business, and so that has been a unique experience for me, or an even more interesting experience for me, because it's gone from dad to boss. And I will forever listen to my dad, at least to some extent, where it's like, oh, well, dad's saying it. So he's been doing this for 40 years. He's got to know, right? Yeah. And there have been several instances where he said something to me and I've just kind of nodded my head and then went back to my desk and went, that wasn't the right answer. Yeah. That's just not the way we should be doing this. And then the next day he goes, hey, by the way, I was thinking about what we were talking about yesterday and I was just dead wrong. What you were saying was right and I was dead wrong. And I was like, oh, okay, so it's okay to be wrong as long as you acknowledge that you were wrong. Yeah. And it also was one of those deals where it happened pretty early in my dad and I's like working relationship. I was like, okay, he has a lot more experience and he knows a lot more than you do. However, it's okay to question. It's okay to push back a little bit, to know that he's not perfect, and his gut reaction is going to be similar to mine. We're also giant hotheads, both of us. And so that has been an interesting experience for us both, because I've gotten to learn from his experience where he used to just blow up on people in his 20s and 30s because his dad was involved in the business, but in a different way. And so he wasn't there to go, hey, dummy, that doesn't do anything. That doesn't actually work. Right. Whereas when I start getting hot about something, he'll look at me and goes, hey, do you think that's the best approach to this? Do you think that's really going to be the thing that solves this problem? It's like, okay, well, if it's coming from you, then no, probably not, because I know you've flown off the handle on this exact subject. It was just 25 years ago when you were my age. So
that's the cool thing too about being a parent and having that relationship with your parents, is you can take away the things that they did really well, right? And then they tell you like, oh, I'd made this mistake, or I should have done this different. And so then you're thinking, you're like, okay, how can I implement that, in my kid's life? Or, my dad, he was a hothead too when we was growing up. And so now whenever I'm with the boys and stuff, I do catch myself. Obviously, evidently it's genetic. I catch myself sometimes too. I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, oh, nope. Look back, dial it back. I didn't like it whenever my dad did that. So let's try a different approach with this. How can we do it differently? So that is one of the cool things about being a parent. Is, take some of the advice, but you learn from the mistakes.
Well, and you get both sides of it, right? You get to take from your dad and your mother, and then you also get to take from your spouses. Yeah, and that's been a fun thing for us, because Don, my mother and father-in-law, just moved to town within the last. It's been about a year now, and getting to interact more with them than I ever have, and getting to kind of learn some things from the father-in-law too. That's been interesting as well.
Different those styles are, right?
Yes,
from your parents
drastically so in my place.
Right? Yeah, there's no wrong way to do it.
But, no, it's just different. I think that's the interesting thing is you do, again, we've talked about this ad nauseum, you do what you think is right, and there's no way to find out it's wrong until 20 years later, and then you get to see the results of your parenting.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like, the people that match up with each other, I feel like most of the time come from those very different, very, very different family dynamics that end up producing compatible. Yeah.
Sure. So talk about you, and you flirted with it earlier, but talk about volunteerism with your kids. Because obviously you have a job and then you have a job, but that second job is a volunteer role.
Yeah, and that's where, and that's one of the other things I think I love about all the different events I get to take them to, is that many of them are connected to different organizations and charities that you can volunteer with. Cool. And so they see the different types. Well, I think they not only see the different types of work being done around the community, but they see that there are people that are passionate or spending their time about all these things. And so, I'll talk with them about their interests are probably not going to be my interests. I hope they pick their own interests, and chances are there'll be things that'll be different.
Unless it's the Cardinals, and then that's a non-negotiable.
Cardinals and Bears,
assume, right?
Well, I
don't mean to derail the conversation here, but I assume that's a non-negotiable.
I would struggle a little bit if they weren't Missouri State Bears fans. I would really, really struggle if they ended up being somehow Wichita State fans. That may be one of the more
what I'm buying his kids for Christmas.
Ever have to deal with. But beyond that, that's that whatever your interest is, there are causes out there, and there are ways that you can kind of volunteer, and seeing the impact of that. And then how easily you can kind of incorporate that into your life. So we do, and this is directly aligned with kind of the lesson I learned from my dad. But we will take trash bags with us when we go on greenways walks or hikes.
cool.
We love
Such a simple, easy way.
Yeah, love going on hikes, and that's an easy way to kind of help out a little bit when you're doing something fun. So
That's
like
great.
that.
we also we've got piggy banks for them that are piggy banks for savings, and then piggy banks for donations, and then let them kind of pick what they're gonna donate to, and kind of talk about anytime that we're kind of contributing to a cause, we'll talk about that with them, and kind of usually they'll have seen something associated with it. And we can kind of talk about the connection there.
Sure.
Nice. Do they have any specific organization that they're passionate about right now? Any group that they really love?
The library.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
So that's
a good
we love the Library Foundation, does a lot of great work supporting them.
sure.
So we do that a lot as a family. But I mean, they are library super fans. I think
Cool.
They've been. I was on the library board for several years before being on council, and they have been. I think they're in the library publications more in a typical month than I was in several years as a board member. So that's something that they are very.
They're
passionate
famous,
about right
man.
now.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, and another good thing too about getting them involved with those different organizations and volunteering is, at least I know from personal experience with Rotaract and all the volunteering we did,
Yeah,
you're
man.
able to see different parts of the community that you probably wouldn't have otherwise seen, or
Accurate.
get involved with certain groups or people that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so just again, we've talked about that several times, is it just exposes them to different people, different organizations, and that's only going to benefit them in the future. So
Sure.
great job to you for doing all that already.
Yeah, I mean, and it's similar to kind of the talent attraction and retention conversations we have in Springfield about trying to keep people in Springfield, particularly college students, that so often they don't know what's in our community because they're only used to campus and whichever street has the 4 or 5 bars on it, and
Fast food
yeah, and the one nearest Andy's and fast food restaurant. And I think similarly, young professionals, once they're out of school, they can kind of still get in their own habits. And I go home and I go to work and I go to my local watering hole or whatever, and I go to church or whatever it is, but then you don't get out of your immediate little area, and you don't go to the Dream Center, and help over there, or you're not familiar with the southwest side of town that's growing like crazy, and you didn't know it was over there.
Right.
And so you do. It is kind of fun to get involved around your community, and getting your kids set up with that early is awesome.
And that's the best way, I think, to feel connected to your community, whatever it is. Being involved in a volunteer organization, you've got a social network from that alone, and you've got a real tie that helps people stay here and feel like they belong here.
Well, I got to ask a follow up because you started to talk about it earlier. So you said you did some service with the library board, and that kind of led you to council. What was your motivation to go towards council? Was it leadership? Was it volunteerism? What was your kind of what was the catalyst? What was your motivator?
So I had always been kind of interested in politics from a younger age than someone probably should be interested in politics, but my interest in it came from I saw that as this is a way to help your community.
Yeah.
And as I got older, I feel like I kind of developed skill sets, developed experience that would let me give back to the community in this role. So the library board was something I was serving on because I like kids. I love the libraries. I think they play an important role in our community. Also was serving on the Foundation for Springfield Public Schools, and a few others that gave me kind of the experience of what a board was like. And so when the council position came open, there was a retirement to run for state representative in 2018. Yeah. I felt like at that time, I'd been long enough in my job that I felt like I had kind of a good background there. Passion for the community. I felt like my work as a researcher, providing information to make good decisions, is something that I could contribute to the conversation, because having those different perspectives I think is really valuable, and hopefully that research kind of perspective is valuable. So all those things kind of together aligned the passion and I think the ability to contribute. I also at the time was when I was appointed was the youngest member of council, and one of my goals was not to be the youngest member anymore.
Sure.
And I'm not. So Heather Hardinger
Oh,
was
yeah,
elected
yeah.
in 2021, who was younger, and then now Kelly Carroll and Brandon Jensen, who were just elected, are also both younger.
There
So
you go.
Brandon's-
I moved up the ladder.
Mission accomplished.
Brandon's in his late 20s. Yes?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I moved up the ladder pretty quickly. The average age on council after this April dropped, I think, from 58 to 48.
Wow.
And I'm now the third most senior, not in terms of age, but third most senior in terms
In
of
tenure.
length of service. So
Wow.
that moved up kind of quickly. But that's something that when I decided I wanted to apply for it, I reached out to everyone on council. I didn't know most of them, but I reached out to them just asking to be able to talk with them and learn what the job was like before I decided if it's something I could actually do in terms of the time commitment. All of them were great to meet with me, and so that idea too, I think of. And this is not to this point yet with the kids, but hoping to kind of show them in the future that, if you want to do something, reach out to the people that are doing it. You may look at them, council is literally up on a pedestal when we have our meetings, and you may look at people in those positions you want to do, whatever it is, as being kind of unreachable, but they're not. Mm-hmm. Most people, I think, across the board want to help others that want to get involved in whatever they're doing, and that was certainly my experience. And then also just kind of feeling like you belong. So the very first meeting I had on council, we had the open session, then you had to go into closed session for some legal matters, and they voted to go into closed session, and the mayor said, all right, we need everyone to clear the room. So I get up from the table and I start walking out. He stops me and says, no, you stay. So it took me a while to...
Matthew, please sit down.
It took me a while to realize, I belong up at this table with people that I've just been watching.
That makes
on
sense.
TV. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So let's say you've got a peer who's got a kid similar to you at a young age. They've shown interest in getting involved in politics or getting involved in leadership. What are some things that you would coach them to coach their kid on, or what are some things that you would guide their kid towards?
Well, one thing I would say is kind of reach out to people like me and others in these positions, because we are happy to help. One of my favorite things we get to do is when we have school groups or scout groups or any kind of youth groups come, and we get to talk about, they get to sit in the seats, we show them how the voting buttons work, and we get to talk about what council's like and answer their questions. Cool. I love that sort of thing. I think you'll find most people in these positions do too, because we're doing this for the future, and somebody else is going to be sitting in our seats someday, and hopefully it's one of those kids that we're kind of working with. And so being able to prepare kind of future generations so that they feel like they belong at the table from day one, unlike me, I think is something that you get a lot of reward out of.
Cool. That's cool. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and props to you, Matt, because everybody in town has their own opinion on what should happen in the community, but you're actually going out there and doing it and making the difference. So,
Thanks. Yeah.
So appreciate
Big
what
deal.
you do, Matt. Well, let's kind of change gears here a little bit, because we was talking before we started recording, and I told you that we were going on a pretty big road trip coming up here in a month or two. And you were saying you had a pretty good road trip story, or maybe some tips for
some experience
for us, because we could definitely use it. So yeah, share some of your stories with us, Matt.
So my favorite road trip story is from when Daniel was 4, and it's hard sometimes with the council and the college work schedules for me to take off an extended period of time. So it's not a guarantee if we get those each year, but that year was able to. And so I was very excited as soon as I found out I was able to take off that period of time. I started researching, and this was a stage where if he had the opportunity, he would still potentially take two naps a day. So I mapped out a trip where we would be going to usually 2 or 3 places, big places every day, and then would have a length of drive that was timed to what was the typical duration of his nap in between those.
Nice.
So we start, and then the other thing was at this time he was very into carousels. That was his favorite. Anytime we go to Silver Dollar City, which we go a lot, that was his favorite ride, and we'd ride it over and over again. So I found places that had carousels. So we start our trip, and we drive up a few hours to St. Louis while he's sleeping the first day, and then stop at Grant's Farm, which has a carousel there in the zoo area, and so get to do the zoo and do the carousel, and then drive on to Evansville, where we stayed the night, and had to go, of course, see campus and their basketball arena, which is one of many sites of heartbreak for me as a Bears fan. There's more of those I can count, but I still have to see them because it was on my list to see, and so you can see them. And planned out all the restaurants, of course, in advance, which. The restaurant stuff, you do all the research on what are the best kid-friendly restaurants and which have the best kids menus, and it's still very hit or miss. I will say that part of it.
Good to know.
The research, I don't know that you'd have different results from just stopping randomly,
just going wherever you find.
And then we drove to Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana, big theme park there that had 2 carousels as a part of the park. So
did you know that was a thing? I didn't know.
I'd heard of it. Yeah.
It's
interesting.
So, the only reason I know about Holiday World is when lived in Nashville, was going to grad school, and they advertised heavily in the Nashville market. And one time, Teresa and I, while we were there, won free tickets from a booth at some fair to Holiday World. So we drove up. It's about a couple hours from Nashville, and their big promotion. It's a really nice theme park. They have a Thanksgiving area and a Halloween area and 4th of July, and some really nice roller coasters. And their big promotion thing is that they've got free sunscreen and free soda, soft drinks all over the park. So like all over, they have these little stations with the soda fountains and then giant dispensers of sunscreen. And they've got a water park that's part of the park.
Well, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Well, I guess I know where we're going.
Right?
And it's not too bad. It was. If you drove there straight, it'd probably be maybe 6 hours, I think, from
That's
Springfield.
not outrageous. We can make that work. Yeah.
So it had.
I want to see Santa Claus.
Yeah. So it had 2 carousels. So we went there, and then we went to. And then that night we drove into Cincinnati and went to a Reds game that evening, and it had been a pretty long day. Even taking the naps in the car, which that part worked out really well, and he was loving the carousels.
Awesome.
Yeah, we made it through about the 5th inning before he needed to go to bed. So we got to the hotel room, and I flip on the game while we're getting him ready for bed, and. Not a minute after I turned on the game, there was a home. We were sitting in the left field elevated area. Not a minute after I turned on the game, there was a home run that landed in the seat I was sitting in. And
right in the cup holder.
We had met next to us. I saw one of them run over and grab the ball. So if we could have held on just one more inning, so we went to the Reds game. Then the next day we went to the Cincinnati Zoo, which is huge and really impressive, and also has a carousel, so we got to ride it there.
Love that, man.
And then went up to Indianapolis, and went to the big children's museum there and the zoo, both of which in different days, both of which had carousels. The one thing I do kind of regret from that, and it's kind of the whole thinking back when you're older, what you wish you'd have done in the situation, is that the first day we were in Indianapolis, there was a bike rental place that had almost like a minivan style bike where it had double rows of seats, and you sat like a driver and pedaled in the front row. And
cool.
And Daniel really wanted to ride that, but it was about like an hour before the place closed, and so I figured we wouldn't have a lot of time to ride before we'd have to return it, because you'd have to turn them into the person before they left. So I said, well, we can do this. We'll do it tomorrow. And so we come back tomorrow, and they're closed.
Oh no!
And that was we had to leave after we went to the zoo that day. So, so I wish, in retrospect, like even if we could have ridden it for 10 minutes, I don't think his memory would have been any different from 10 minutes versus 2 hours. So I wish I would have just, if you have the chance to do something, just do it and don't. Yeah,
that's good advice, because I'm in the process of planning this road trip out that we're getting ready to do. And good for you for figuring out everywhere that has a carousel.
I'm fascinated by
some digging in that, because the places don't always necessarily, there's no carousel filter on Google.
Right? Yeah.
So it's a matter of searching reviews and
frequently
looking for
asked questions. Do you have a carousel?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm just like, oh, which one of these has a nice park, the playground that they play in? And you're like, man, making me feel bad over here figuring out the carousels. But no, I'm glad you said that though, because on the way back, that's why I was talking to my wife last night or night before about it. I was like, we could stop here and do this. And one of them's the Omaha Zoo.
Yeah.
I was like, on the way back, which I heard is great.
Yeah.
And I was like, we could do that. We might not have time, but hearing you say that, I'm like, we're going to do it.
I would just
We're
do
gonna
it.
make
Line it
happen.
up.
Right.
Do it. They will remember, no matter how, even if you don't, you will be the one feeling like you didn't get to spend a long enough time there. I mean,
right.
They'll
That's a great
have
point.
the
That's a
memory,
great point. Yeah.
whatever amount of time
They
you
won't
spend
know
there.
any
Yeah.
different. Sure.
No.
All right, Matthew, tell us about some of your funny stories. Inevitably, dads are going to have funny stories about their families. So here's your chance. Talk away, pal. What do you got?
So I'll tell a couple of stories that are connected by a common theme, and that's my kids' love of robots.
Nice.
And also a chance to brag on my wife,
Carousels
Teresa.
and
Yeah.
robots. I like it.
My Teresa does a great job every year making custom Halloween costumes.
Cool.
And so she always lets the boys pick what they're going to be. And that's always risky when you're making a costume that takes time to make, because what they want to be will change from day to day for a stretch there. But they have, and they've been different animals at times, but one of the consistent themes for them has been costumes related to food and robots. So
I love that. God, I love that so much. That's hilarious.
So one year Daniel wanted to be a donut robot. Very, very specific.
That is. Yeah.
Interesting.
A donut robot. So Teresa made him. He was 3 at the time. She made him.
Do you take him to like Krispy Kreme? Is that where he's like seeing this?
We don't. We sometimes we can walk to a couple donut shops from her house, and so she and I will sometimes walk them over there.
Nice.
I don't feel like we get donuts that much though, but he
Enough to make an impression.
enough to
That'll
make
work.
an impression.
Yeah.
And so she made him a D3 donut robot. Had a donut little making machine thing on it, and donuts
awesome.
at the antennas and everything. And so he wore that to the Spooky Symphony and did the costume parade and ended up winning one of the prizes for it.
Nice.
Which that was the first time he had won something at an event like that, and that was a big moment. He still talks about that.
That's awesome.
And so then a couple years later, he wanted to be a pizza oven robot. So she made him a full brick pizza oven costume that had the door open with the pizza on it. And one of the events we went to that year was the parade at Hammond's Field. And, there was Domino's had a tent there, and Marty Prather was there at the Domino's tent. And he loved, Daniel came up in his pizza robot costume, and he was talking with Daniel about how, he's never seen someone dressed as a pizza oven before, and loved his costume, and said, you've got a job at Domino's if you want one. And then he reached behind the table. They had all the candy and the bowls on the table. He reached behind the table and he asked Daniel if he wanted a king sized. I don't remember king sizes being this big, but they were huge. King size box of Skittles or a Kit Kat. And Daniel picked the box of Skittles. He also still talks about that to this day. That was a really cool moment. But
That's fun.
My youngest loves robots too, and we have the go downtown a lot for different events and things, and you have Sculpture Walk, and they had the thinking robot sculpture this past year. And the thinking robot sculpture was Arthur's best friend. Anytime we were anywhere near downtown, he had to go say hello. He would stop and sit there and just talk with the robot. He'd do the thinking pose with him, the same thinking pose with him for a while. And
so cool.
He'd always have different theories each time on what the robot was thinking about. It was usually either food or dragon related. So he loves that robot. He also will still wear Daniel's old robot costumes that Daniel has outgrown, and we were really excited when the thinking robot got the permanent home at the Discovery Center.
Yeah,
I think he's going to be visiting him probably there.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't the imagination of a child just fascinating?
Yes.
It's
just
so cool.
Pizza robot, donut robot. I love it. That's so cool.
Yeah, Liam's just now hitting that stage probably the past couple months where his imagination's really clicking, and he talks to us in car rides and stuff, and he makes up names for all of his toys and stuff, and we're like, who's Marshall? And he's like, that's my truck, don't you know his name is Marshall? And we're like,
Yes,
No,
I do.
we didn't.
Sorry, nice to meet you, Marshall.
It's so, but yeah, it's so cool. It's so fun to
And they remember the universes they've constructed. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
Definitely.
It can
Yeah.
be something you haven't talked about in months, and they'll still remember the
Yeah.
intricate details of Marshall and whoever the friends are. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I can't wait. I cannot wait for that.
Soon enough for you, man. It's
I know we're right on the
coming
corner.
up.
Elsie's already playing with some toys and stuff. It's not just she's got her imagination is not great though. She does name a couple toys. She's got 2 little like doll type things, but just little plastic people. And it's one of them's named Baby and one of them's named Elsie. Which we didn't
Creative.
get too
I like
far
it.
away from her name or what we call her, the Baby and Elsie. It's like, well, you'll get there one of these days, kid.
Dude, she will. Like once it starts clicking, it clicks for him.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Well, so let's kind of wrap this thing up. Let's get to everybody's favorite part of the episode.
What's everybody's favorite part?
It's Dad Joke of the Week.
Ah,
So Matthew, inevitably every dad worth his salt has also got to have a dad joke. You've already slid one in there today. Do you
Yeah.
have any other ones that you like?
I'll go with my favorite one.
Perfect.
So,
I love it when a man has a favorite dad joke.
favorite out of too long of a list, if you ask me. But so Duck walks into a store, waddles up to the counter, and goes to the store owner and asks, "Do you have any duck food?" The guy says, "No, sorry." And so the duck waddles out. Next day, Duck waddles back in, goes up to the owner. "Do you got any duck food?" The owner says, "No, we don't carry duck food here." Waddles out. Next day, Duck waddles back in, up to the counter, asks the owner, "Do you got any duck food?" The owner's pretty frustrated at this point, so he says, "Listen, I've told you 2 days in a row, we don't have any duck food here. And if you come in tomorrow and ask again, I'm going to nail your feet to the floor." So Duck leaves. Next day comes, Duck waddles back in, goes up to the counter, asks the owner, "Do you have any nails?" The owner says, "No." Duck says, "Do you have any duck food?"
That's great.
Good. Nice work, man. That's solid.
That was good. We've had a few duck jokes on here,
We actually
but that
have.
was not one. So that was
That's
really
solid.
good.
Yeah, that's really good. All right.
Wow.
Well, mine is really weak, so I'm going to go next so you can finish it off.
I feel like we should have ended on that one. That was
God,
good.
no kidding. That was too perfect. So I've got a lot of hobbies, but one of them, I am an expert. I have become recently an expert in picking leaves and heating them in water. It's my specialty.
I was like, there's a tea joke in here somewhere. I don't know where you're going with this. But,
Weak. All right, what do you got?
That was
man.
brewing for a while, right? Yeah.
right. Man.
Come
they're just-
on.
They're just
Yes.
roll
Hey, give me some
off.
of that. That was
Man,
pretty good. Yeah,
dang.
that was nice work.
I'm gonna have to have Matt on
Yeah,
here
follow
more
that,
often.
big boy.
Jeez.
He's in our
That
dad
was
joke off next
smooth,
time around, by the
right?
way.
Yeah, take my spot, please. Good night. All right, fellas. Short and simple here. What is faster, hot or cold?
I have no idea.
Hot. You can catch a cold.
Oh my God. Yeah, baby.
Well done.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Oh, man.
God. So, Derek, wrap us up here.
All right. Well, we first of all, big thank you, big shout out to all of our listeners, subscribers. I mean, we've been growing a lot lately, and you guys have been giving us lots and lots of shout outs. I mean, at time of recording this episode, we have 1,365 subscribers on our YouTube channel alone.
Which is kind of fun, considering we've been doing this for about 6 months now. Not
right?
quite there.
We thought it was going to take us a lot longer to get here than
absolutely.
than 6 months. We're getting a lot of fun comments too, whether it's dad jokes or dad hacks or just some people just chiming in on our videos, giving us compliments or telling us what works for them, and we appreciate that so much. If you guys just please keep doing that, please keep giving us your thoughts. But yeah, that's
perfect.
That's really all I got.
Awesome. Well, we have to say thanks for being here, pal.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you for having me.
And we do also have to say, way to go, decent dad.
Yep.
Nice
Way to
work.
go, Matt. Good job,
Way to
buddy.
go, brother. So unless anybody else has anything else,
I got nothing.
perfect. All right, we'll wrap this thing up. Then we'll see you next time.
It is funny though. I look back on those pieces of dad advice, and I'm just like, oh man, thanks, Dad.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's like I'm gonna hit you up on a potty break this time.